Watch. One file, 6 seconds. First, a dull noise, then a breath, then a voice. No coordinates, no explanation, just one phrase. They're not human. He didn't take a GPS. He navigated by a map printed in 1953. Old marks, forgotten trails, paths that no longer exist. He said the new trail wasn't real. He said the trail had shifted. He went to check a point and never made contact again. Jacob Wright was known throughout the northern part of the county. Not a hero, not a public figure, but a quiet landmark. A ranger stationed there since few knew where the forest boundary lay. 54 years old, 30 years in forestry service. He never boasted of his time or his service, though in his youth he was a reservist and still kept neatly folded army dog tags. He lived alone in a small house near the ridge, beyond the fields. Neighbors said lights rarely burned there. Jacob appeared on the patch briefly, collecting instructions, submitting reports, taking maps. Service wasn't a metaphor for him. He did everything precisely, purely, by the book. Even kept his old radio, long since retired, in working order, with carefully marked frequency. Since his wife died, 5 years earlier in a car crash on US 87, he seemed to close the door on life behind him. After the funeral, he stopped going into town, sold his old car, changed his number. He'd speak to colleagues only on duty, sparingly. Those who worked with him long understood. This wasn't reclusion, but preservation. He wasn't unsociable, but always on a step back, like he stayed half a step from any conversation. He had one habit all who patrolled with him noticed: a journal. Not a notebook or phone notes, a thick paper diary in leather with hand-drawn tables, date, time, temperature, wind direction, route, observations. In remarks, Jacob wrote brief but precise notes. 12:47, links by the creek, westbound, fresh track. Or, trail turn 11C overgrown, trail fading. Some mocked the antique sky. But those records once helped find a missing camper. It was his note about a disappearing water flow that led rescuers to cross an old dry gulch and find her dehydrated but alive. Jacob hated most when someone went off route. His phrase, "We don't explore, we observe," became county wisdom. He believed in the map, believed in route symmetry, believed the forest was order, not chaos. Which is why his disappearance, on a routine patrol day, no extreme weather, no strain, no reason to deviate, was not just alarming. It was inexplicable. The entry from October 6th, 2015, read like most lines in Jacob's journal. 8:13 a.m. Due, 9:02, a deer track, northwest direction. 12:47, the trail to Grizzly Lake has shifted. Check old map. Deviation, 20 to 25 meters east. That last phrase confused whoever read the journal after his disappearance. Trails don't just shift. It's not a stream, not a snowbank, not a landslide. It's a fixed path carved along a slope, worn by hikers' feet, marked on maps. Even if vegetation changed, it can't just move. Colleagues took it as Jacob's character. He often noted things others missed. A junior ranger shown the note laughed. It's like saying a star is not quite in the right place. Maybe it's just a different rock. Jacob didn't argue. He just compared. He took an old paper map from the archive, 1953 topography, the very one later found in his backpack, full of creases and pencil notes, trails, lost markers, vanished landmarks. This map wasn't just routes. It was a record of how the forest changed over decades. When he brought it to the station, the coordinator asked, "You gonna recheck federal surveys?" Jacob answered sharply, "I'm looking for one point." No one said more. No one scrutinized those 20 meters displacement. No one knew that to him, the trail to Grizzly Lake no longer matched reality. Something in the terrain, the turns, the tree layout felt broken. He wasn't superstitious, but he memorized the setting in his bones. If a step didn't fit right, he felt it. He returned twice that week, first on October 8th, second on the 10th. Then he wrote in margins, "Feeling of displacement, visually same, but not in line. Footprint misses." The map he checked in his final days was faded with a torn edge and old wax seal from the inventory archive. A corner stamp read, USGS, North Adirondack Sector, surveyed 1953. He kept it in a black tube with old overlays, route sketches, and notes in different handwriting, likely older surveyors. He didn't pull out that map by chance. His journal shows it was a main guide amid growing doubt about current geography. The spot he called East Point 2 near Grizzly Lake looked different on the 1953 map. The trail was a curve, heading to a cliff and vanishing. But on the 2009 map, the same trail ran straight, ending at a flat clearing. His margin note, old map, detour, new map, straight exit. Who made the straight path? Wasn't there in the 70s. Jacob didn't just compare, he overlaid the old map on the new circled discrepancies. Marked the curve in red and labeled, "Search point here." Later, on the same map found in his backpack after his disappearance, that zone was thickly circled next to words, "She's not here." What that meant, unclear. Who is she? The trail? The line? Or something once there, but now gone? Jacob Wright hadn't spoken to his brother for nearly 5 years. Their quarrel erupted soon after the funeral for Jacob's wife, and since then, silence settled. Differences in how to live after loss, how to treat family, what to say, what to leave unsaid. These slowly severed even the most familiar gestures. His brother lived out of state. No calls, no letters. Neither did Jacob. Which is why the call on October 11th, one day before the disappearance, came as a shock. No preamble. No, hello? No, how are you? Just a dry, even voice, emotionless. If something happens to me, check the old mine behind the ridge. You know where. His brother, Jonathan Wright, didn't believe it was real at first, not because of the words, but the tone. It wasn't a request nor a warning, but an instruction. Preformed, spoken automatically. He tried to say something back, but Jacob had already hung up. October 12th, 2015 began with steady temperatures and clear skies. The area gave no cause for alarm, no storms, no scheduled drills, no tourist influx. Just a regular fall Monday, exactly the kind Jacob loved. Cool, dry air, good sight lines through the treetops. He left home early, around 6:30, as always, checking the home radio one last time. He wasn't assigned a formal patrol for the day. This was a voluntary sweep. The route was listed as planned outing beyond Southern Loop with line control near Grizzly Lake. He hadn't applied for a second team assignment, though protocols required it. Formally, it was a violation, but with Jacob, exceptions were made. His routes were always trackable, with confirmed exit points and solid radio contact. The local deputy who met him that morning noted Jacob seemed composed, but tense. He wore warmer layers than the weather called for, a thick thermal jacket over a flannel shirt, a balaclava in his pack, flashlight, spare batteries. As if he prepared to stay overnight, though records showed the outing took under 4 hours. His GPS logger, now a mandatory tool, started recording at exactly 7:12. The first coordinate came from near Stone Fang, a landmark between Logan Creek Line and a trail branching south. The path tracked steadily, north edge of the lake, an old turn, to the southern clearing. The last mark came at 12:47. It was linked with a handwritten note in the journal, heading to the point. After that, nothing. The radio went silent. No return calls logged. Weather remained stable. Visibility perfect. No sign of distress, no equipment failure. Just silence. One man, one route, and no more coordinates. The spot marking Jacob's last GPS coordinate was 40 meters from the west end of Grizzly Lake. This was where the trail made a slight bend around a cliff and followed the slope. According to the 1953 archival map, the very one later found in Jacob's pack, the trail didn't run straight there, but curved, bypassing a section unmarked on the legend. The new map, a 2009 edition, showed this segment as straight and safe. This was the version Jacob was supposed to follow, yet his GPS told a different story. He stopped exactly where the old map veered away. When the signal cut out, it wasn't a fall or slow drift, but a sharp vanishing of the point. The device didn't note signal lost, like canyons often do. No attempts to update or trace back. Just 1247, heading to the point. Then nothing. For search coordinators, it was puzzling. Could he have stayed put, gone further, veered off and turned off the logger, or was it switched off for him? Alarm sounded the next day when he failed to check in or return. Early hope guessed a technical delay, signal failure, fatigue, weather holdup. But by 10 a.m. the next day, Jacob was gone, and gone in a place where he'd sensed something wrong about the trail. Grizzly Lake was always considered a quiet patch. No active tourist routes, no official campgrounds. The nearest site was almost a kilometer away. Cold, clear, bordered by pine and fir forest. But the terrain was tricky. The western slope was eroded, and the old path along the shore long overgrown. This was the area targeted in the search for Jacob. The initial teams, his colleagues, scoured the trail and radius up to 500 meters inward. They found nothing. No pack, no trash, no broken branches, no usual chalk marks on trees he'd leave. It all looked untouched, as if no one had been there. Searchers performed sound scans, tapped tree trunks, and used radio beacons. No response, no echo, not a single auditory signal, not a single reply. What was most striking, in that area, even animals were suspiciously absent. Normally, around the lake, you'd see signs of moose, lynx, small creatures, tracks on the water. Now, complete silence. No tracks, no sounds, no movement. The zone where the signal cut out didn't look dangerous. But that's what made it frightening. Everything seemed normal until you started noticing the details. Trees stood oddly. Moss grew the wrong way. The terrain subtly shifted. Something was off. Unseen, but felt. It was a place where nothing unusual should happen. But it became the point from which no one could explain where a man who knew the woods best went. When Jacob missed check-in by evening of October 12th and didn't show by the next morning, the desk officer filed the first note. No contact. Wright, Route Grizzly. Concern, moderate. Standard phrasing. No panic. Jacob hadn't broken protocol without cause, but by noon, after 3 failed radio attempts, the search coordinator triggered Phase 1. Assemble the team, check the route, cross-check journals, and weather. The tracker showed steady progress, but a halt at a point with no return. Radio was silent. By 3 p.m., the first 2 teams set out. They covered the North Arc and the lake's southern shore. Everything looked normal, but too normal. No common signs of movement. Soft trail spots, moss, soil, autumn leaves, held no boot prints. The senior tracker, Ed Hobart, said later, "I've roamed these woods for 30 years, and for the first time I don't know what I feel. It's clean, but sterile, like everything was cleaned up beforehand." The second team searched for signs of a camp, fire pits, markers, backpack traces. Within a 300-meter radius from the GPS point, nothing. No radiation or heat spots detected. The air was still and dead. The paper route stopped existing in reality. No sign of Jacob's presence, except the logger. And that was the start of a true paradox. Data said he was here, but everything said he never moved there. When coordinators downloaded the full GPS logs from Jacob's device, they faced another puzzle. The unit, a reliable model, charged and rugged, recorded movement from 7:12 a.m. to 12:47 p.m. After that, a blackout. No signal attempts, no errors, no autosave. As if the signal didn't just drop, it ceased to exist. A technical report noted no data on battery drain, overheating, impact, or signal failure. Simply, recording ended, no cause, no reaction to external factors. This raised tension in the team. The device should ping at least once every 30 minutes, even in passive mode. If it stopped transmitting, it should record that. It didn't. They cross-checked weather, no storms, no trees, or terrain-blocking signals. Nothing. NOAA backup data confirmed clear, stable skies at 12:47. The internal communications psychologist later said, "People don't fear signal loss. They fear when no one cut it off, and it just stopped." From then, some searchers whispered too softly and looked around more than usual. Because a glitch is one thing, but when all technology, trail, sound fall silent at once, it's not statistics. It's a breakdown in reality's logic. On the 9th day after the disappearance, October 21st, a local man entered the Logan Creek camp. 62-year-old Miles Harper, a former surveyor who mapped the forest in the 80s. Not part of the operation, but he noticed the route map on the board and said, "That section, there used to be a logging trail. It isn't there anymore." He pointed to a small fragment about 800 meters east of the last GPS point. The group hadn't planned to check it, not on current maps or satellite images. However, paper archives revealed the 1981 official forestry map marked it as a planned logging cut before inexplicably deleting it. They sent a team, and there, in dense, near-virgin growth, no trails, no markings, Jacob Wright's body was found. He lay on his back, arms at sides, backpack zipped, face calm, no external injuries, no tracks, dents, or signs someone carried or dragged the body, as if he'd lain down himself. But that was impossible, neither by route, strength, nor logic. It was a place he shouldn't have reached, not even if he tried, because he wasn't supposed to be there on any map. Jacob's backpack lay beside the body, on dry ground, uncovered, undamaged. Straps fastened, fabric clean, zipper intact. At first glance, a veteran patrolman's gear, water supply, first aid kit, thermal shirt, spare compass, old Army flashlight with a red lens, and 2 maps sealed in plastic. The first, a standard modern map, 2009 edition, he never used. Folded in the bottom compartment, unmarked. The second, the topography from 1953, was in the main section, taken out of its tube, folded manually into quarters. Fresh pencil marks covered the folds. A section between Grizzly Lake and the Eastern Logging Trail circled in red. Underneath, a note. "She's not here." Where showed the map was actively used in recent days. Dirt smudges on creases, worn edges, light ink smearing on old notes. It wasn't just a guide, it was the core of his route. While coordinators debated the meaning of the note, forensic experts found another detail. 5 pages were carefully torn from his journal, the thick, leather-bound notebook with neat entries. The gap matched exactly the period between October 6th and 11th, those days when he started cross-referencing old maps and noting trail displacement. No scraps or traces of pages were found in the pack or pockets. Someone either removed them intentionally or he destroyed them before leaving. The last remaining journal entry was made on the evening of October 11th. Weather steady, going out alone, must check the site. Old points shift. Map says one thing, feet say another. The drawing with this symbol was on the penultimate page of Jacob's journal. First, a simple pencil sketch, a triangle with a dot beneath. No signature, no explanation. Only nearby a phrase. A mark on the layer, but not on the surface. When investigators studied the 1953 map, one officer noticed by chance. In the center of the circled area lay an old symbol from archived layers, unsigned, unmarked, resembling a simplified stake or mine. Comparison showed the shape matched Jacob's sketch. Officially, the symbol wasn't decoded. Such signs appeared rarely in old papers, sometimes connected to uranium prospecting, sometimes to areas with suppressed animal movement, a term from Cold War ecological geophysical research. A surveyor from the 80s unofficially said, "These might have been zones avoided simply because instruments misbehaved. Not dangerous, just unstable. The mark meant to keep people away." The same sign would later be found scratched on a mine wall, with drips as if from old moisture or rust. The sign was no mere decoration. It was part of an internal logic Jacob never explained, or didn't have time to, but which perhaps signaled caution or action. Only on the third day after the body was found did a search team locate his service radio, 3 kilometers southeast of the main site, at the edge of an old clear-cut under a fallen pine root. It was on. Power indicator lit. Battery at half charge. Device undamaged. Speaker working. Frequency set right. But call logs were empty. The official report stated, the radio did not transmit or receive. No signals were recorded. Test successful. Cause of no calls unknown. The immediate question, why was the radio so far from the body? Jacob never left it behind, even to rest. It was always clipped to his pack strap, checked 3 times per route. For it to be far away, something must have forced him to remove it, or someone did it for him. Some team members speculated he might have passed it to another, or left it as a marker if he moved off. But no messages or signal trials were recorded. Another theory, it was deliberately discarded to mislead the trail. Then the heavier question emerged. Who and why? The device was fully functional, but like much in this case, it simply stopped speaking, as if it too was not meant to be on the route anymore. On the 4th day after the body was found, when the search formally shifted to analytical investigation, a support team patrolling the southern section of the logging trail discovered a chain of footprints on a damp patch near a dried creek. At first, attention focused on a boot print in the clay embankment. Its shape differed from typical hiking boots, with a clear army sole pattern featuring deep blocks. Preliminary size matched roughly 44 to 45, mismatched with Jacob's size, 42 boots. There were only 3 footprints heading from the creek toward the slope. Then the trail ended abruptly, like the person stopped or sharply changed direction. Terrain there had thick layers of pine needles and rocks, making prints nearly impossible to spot visually without special conditions. Yet near the last print, a small crack in the ground suggested someone had leaned or kneeled. Pressure was light, no other weight signs found. Officers immediately noted the discrepancy. This point was a kilometer from the body and about 2 kilometers from where the radio was found. The footprint's direction from the eastern creek into the forest interior didn't match Jacob's route or GPS trail. Moreover, none of the volunteers or team members wore boots like that, eliminating chance. Photos were sent for analysis, but weather worsened print quality. By the chute, drizzle had blurred the soil's shape. The report said the sole resembled Army boot models from the early 2000s, unlike Ranger or volunteer footwear standards. At this point, the team concluded a third party moved along this path. The question, simple yet alarming, hung in the air. Who was in this forest patch, officially untouched, and why do their prints lead deeper without return? On the 5th day after the body was found, the county sheriff gave a brief statement to the press. His words followed the usual administrative tone. Ranger Wright, a respected officer with many years of service, died in an accident. Most likely, he became disoriented, strayed from the route, and failed to escape a difficult forest area. No signs of violence, assault, or external interference were found. We extend our condolences to the family. The statement immediately sparked mixed reactions in the professional community. Those who worked with Jacob knew he was not a man to get lost. He never entered the woods without a plan. He didn't deviate from routes without cause. Most importantly, he knew the forest better than anyone. The idea that he might have gotten lost seemed absurd. Yet, formally, everything looked tidy. Body found, no signs of struggle, documents intact, no toxins detected, insufficient grounds for criminal proceedings by law. The investigation chose not to include details that didn't fit the logical narrative. Absence of GPS data after 1247, trail displacement, torn journal pages, Army boot tracks off the main route, and the symbol on the map and in the mine. These were either unaddressed or explained away as irrelevant to the incident. Many staff privately expressed confusion. One anonymously said, "It feels like we're closing a lid on something, but we don't know what." When Jacob's brother tried to report the call he'd received the day before the disappearance, it was logged in a separate note but omitted from summaries. Formally, due to lack of evidence, no audio, no witnesses, no way to verify content. Conveniently, nothing disturbed the official version that Jacob simply left and never returned. The remaining pages of Jacob's journal, despite the gap during the crucial week, contained several entries that unsettled the investigation team. One, penciled in without a date, with a light but tense pressure, read, "Today I saw them again, standing among the trees. When you approach, they vanish." No further notes clarified who they were, nor any later mention. The surrounding context, just a few lines before, was typical Jacob observation. Weather, humidity, animal tracks. All dry, objective, emotionless. Then this phrase, sudden, as if from another state of mind. To the department psychologist later consulted, this could indicate paranoia or PTSD. But at no prior or other entry did Jacob show mental instability. His note-taking remained precise, rational, within norms. One colleague, reading that line, said, "He didn't write dreams. He wrote what he saw. If he noticed something, it was there." This fragment was left uninterpreted in official reports. But unofficially, among those who read the full journal, it became a point where concern turned from logic to the internal. Because if a man known for accuracy and sanity writes, "I saw them," and everything else in his life unravels, inconsistencies, oddities, maybe it wasn't him who was off. Maybe it was the forest. A few days after the official search phase ended, when the investigation shifted to passive review, a statement arrived at the station from Daniel Clint, a local and former forest ranger living 2 miles south of the sector where Jacob's body was found. His testimony was not immediately included in protocols. It was deferred as subjective and not procedural. But the content sparked interest among the team, especially among those already doubting the simple version of events. Daniel claimed that on the night of October 12th to 13th, the exact night Jacob's GPS logger lost signal, he was at the back of his property checking the barn before the frost. He recorded the time precisely, 23:41, by the clock above the door. At that moment, he heard his words. Not a voice, but a sharp cry, like someone screaming, not out of fear, but despair. Clint described the sound as not loud, but oppressive, and said it seemed to come from below, as if underground. He even went down to the ravine's edge, where sounds usually carry, but saw only a dense wall of trees and a heavy, viscous silence. He didn't call or report immediately, thinking it might be a fox, a wounded coyote, or an echo of a gunshot. But a week later, upon hearing from a neighbor that someone had died in those woods, he remembered the time and noted it. When coordinators compared this with the GPS data, It matched almost perfectly. At 23:46, Jacob's logger tried to record a single coordinate, but the entry was blank, as if the device switched on for a split second but found no satellites. It wasn't a clear scream, no words. But those who heard Clint's account said it wasn't a plea for help, but a clear sense that someone knew they wouldn't be heard, and screamed anyway. One of the strangest episodes recorded by the support tech team was a compass malfunction in the area where the body was found. During the initial survey, senior cartographer Andrew Holtz tried to set bearings with an analog Silva compass, a standard model he'd used for years. He noted the needle, without any metal interference and far from power lines, started spinning, not sharply, but with a gentle wobble, as if influenced by a non-existent magnetic field. At first, he thought the device was faulty, so they fetched a second compass from the emergency kit. The result repeated. Both needles pointed north in differing directions, and when stepping forward a pace, the needle again twisted. Only after 5 meters beyond the body's zone did everything return to normal. The glitch was filmed and sent to the tech department. They found no explanation. The ground was checked for iron ore, none. No strong electromagnetic sources, none. A normal forest area, free of industry, geological anomalies, or military traces. A follow-up test 2 days later showed no glitch. Everything worked stable. Equipment noted standard magnetic activity. Deviations stayed within norms. But the recording remained, and the readings defied physics. Later, a research department staffer remarked, "This happens, but not simultaneously on 2 compasses. It's not a defect. It's as if someone just didn't want you to find north here." A classic procedure when a body is found after the disappearance point is to confirm the trail using search dogs trained to follow fresh and aged scents. 3 days after Jacob's body was found, 2 dogs were brought in, one from the patrol unit, another from the federal canine team. The dogs started from a neutral spot about 600 meters from the body, where residual scent should remain. The first 30 meters were smooth. The animals acted confident, scenting direction. But as soon as they neared the zone 100 meters from the death site, both stopped simultaneously, whimpered, and refused to proceed. Their behavior was not cautious. It was what trainers call deaf fear, where animals neither attack nor flee, but freeze, lose orientation, and avoid contact, even if the object isn't hostile. Handlers tried to continue, but the dogs sat down, turned away, and buried noses in the ground. Attempts were aborted. Another try with different dogs a day later yielded the same result. Officially unexplained. No chemical odors, animal traces, or decay conditions that could trigger such a reaction were found. Temperature was normal, the body had been removed, and the investigation was closed. Still, at Jacob's resting place, the dogs refused to go. One handler later said, "They weren't scared. They acted like they knew this place wasn't for them, like they weren't allowed." No one would have remembered this if not for a call Jacob made to his brother a day before disappearing. By then, the case was formally closed and archived as an accident. Jonathan Wright showed up at the station, insisting his statement be recorded. He presented call logs proving Jacob's incoming call on the evening of October 11th and repeated the key phrase, "If something happens to me, check the old mine behind the ridge." This wasn't a mere figure of speech. Jonathan explained that as youths, they found a point on their father's old map around Top Hill, labeled in family notes as B-17 closed line. They thought it was a joke or forgotten shaft. But years later, Jacob found a reference to a 1954 geological survey of this area. In 2007, he told Jonathan, "That point exists, just not everyone knows where." The small team set out there after re-examining the diary and 1953 map, where this area was boldly circled with the phrase, "She's not here." Access was harder than expected. Beyond the ridge lay an old pine forest, long unmaintained, with ravines and settled ground. After nearly 3 hours, the group reached an overgrown entrance. Brush hid an old logging trail leading to a concrete ring in the slope, partly covered and closed by rusted grates. No signs, numbers, or warnings, only metal fragments and remnants of old reinforcements. An old track from a transport container was clear at the entrance, along with recent traces: compressed grass, broken branches, an empty plastic bottle, and packaging scraps from modern tools. No one knew who last visited. But one thing was clear: this mine wasn't officially decommissioned, and it simply didn't exist on modern maps. When the team entered the former technical corridor, despite its outward decay, they found some sections still stable. Passages were partly reinforced, air stagnant, but without harmful gases. 25 meters from the entrance began a side tunnel leading to a dead end. There, on a concrete wall at human height, was the carved symbol, a triangle with a dot beneath, the very mark from Jacob's journal and map. The symbol wasn't drawn with marker or chalk, it was deeply etched with a sharp tool, visible in the groove's depth. Rust streaks traced inside the lines, as if moisture had dripped over them for years. No inscriptions, signatures, or technical signs were nearby. The symbol matched the shape and size in his journal. One geologist with the group said, "This isn't a miner's mark, not a navigation, ventilation, or safety symbol. It's not from here, it's something else." Several photos were taken, then the mine was reclosed. A report to the technical director stated, "The site isn't inventoried, mark discovered, meaning unknown." What Jacob sought here remains unclear. But if he knew the place and headed there intentionally, the question isn't just about his death, it's what he hoped to prove or record. When the mine's materials were given to the Regional Geological Survey archive, an employee specializing in old licenses found a document numbered Borehole 17, dated 1954. It was a short-term license for uranium prospecting along the slope between Logan Creek and Top Hill. Officially, the project was suspended without implementation due to low economic feasibility and difficult access. But a non-public note read, "The area is unstable for magnetic sensitivity measurements. Calibration deviations recorded. Repeat survey not recommended." This meant that in mid-20th century measurements, equipment reported values beyond expected norms. This didn't necessarily imply radioactive contamination, but an anomaly in the landscape's physical properties, definitely. Technically, the mine could have been disguised as a suspended project to avoid mandatory closure. That's why it's missing from digital maps, and why no official conservation cementing was found. This didn't prove Jacob died from uranium-related causes, but it proved one thing. He didn't search blindly. He knew what he sought, and judging by the records, where to find it. And the investigation not only ignored this, but deliberately concealed it. When the archival team began thoroughly organizing Jacob's materials, their focus shifted to his journal. It was a thick, bound notebook of standard size with numbered pages, covered in neat, restrained writing. He had kept these journals for over 30 years, each volume covering a year, chronicling routes, observations, weather, deviations, and unusual events. But the journal for 2015 was special. First, it was incomplete, and that immediately raised concern. Between the entry on October 5th and the next, on the 12th, exactly 5 pages were missing, numbered by Jacob himself. Judging by the clean removal, no tears, no fibers, the pages had been carefully taken out, likely by him. At first, this might seem coincidence or choice, but those missing pages covered the very period when, according to GPS and site data, Jacob twice ventured near Grizzly Lake, checked the old map, discussed trail shifts with colleagues, and called his brother. Only on the remaining pages, dated on or before October 12th, were clues, mentions of the old route, a surfacing spot, phrases like, "If the trail moves, someone moved it," and one unexplained note, "Recorded coordinates in a copy, hidden in map. Do not put in journal." What those missing pages contained and why he removed them remains unknown. No drafts, duplicates, or scans. Just a physical gap. This gap became, for deeper investigators, the starting point for theories that Jacob might not only have suspected something, but knew that this info could interfere with someone. Maybe he tried to log a route that couldn't be public, or maybe he tried to protect himself, leaving only part of the picture, hoping the rest would surface later. When Jacob's body was inspected before transport, a compact recorder was found inside one of his backpack's inner pockets, a vintage digital Olympus model used by rangers since the early 2000s. It was on, but the battery was dead. The device went to the lab, where, after new batteries, they recovered one 6-second audio file recorded the night of October 12th. Fila name, Auto Solo 1, WAV. The recording starts with a low, barely audible noise, not like wind, water, or clothing movement, more like a muted, uneven hum, as if in a reverberant space. At 3.7 seconds, a sharp inhale appears. Then, almost whispered in the near channel, a voice says, "They're not human." Then a click, and the file ends. Spectral analysis showed the voice belonged to an adult male, likely Jacob. No overlaps, no distortions, no secondary channels, no outside noise, no digital effects. Everything indicated this was a genuine recording made directly in the forest at the moment of a real event. What he meant, unknown. Who were they? Why record it here, not over the radio, not in a journal, but as an audio message? Some guessed it was a random glitch, a voice fragment mistakenly recorded. But the recorder system forbade recording without a button press. Auto start was off by default. This recording didn't enter the official archive. It was marked unverifiable, included only in the technical appendix as item D7. Yet this phrase sparked wide discussion, from suspicion that Jacob encountered people pretending to be something else, to theories that physical reality of the trail was disrupted, not just spatially, but in perception itself. Jacob's last full journal entry was dated the evening of October 11th, a day before his final outing. Unlike others, it was on a clean page, without formatting, and stood out by its clear statement of a doubt previously unexpressed so directly. The text was brief, penned in dense, confident handwriting. "If the trail moved, someone moved it. The forest doesn't shift, but the lines don't match. I'll check myself. If I don't come back, the point's on the old map, marked, backup route through southeast, not to use, no exit there." What not to use meant was unclear. On a regular map, the southeast exit led toward Top Hill, where the mine would later be found. His wording sounded technical, not like diary musings, but instructions left for someone else. This made some staff suspect Jacob knew his route could become an entry point for another. He didn't say, "If I don't return," he said, "If I don't come out." As if believing escape from that zone didn't depend solely on himself. It was the last phrase left by a man who would disappear the next day. Exactly 8 days after the case was formally closed and all materials archived, the sector coordinator received a report from a reserve night patrol guarding the southern sector border. It was a chance sighting, not planned, not technical. Time, 2:26 a.m. Weather, overcast, windless, light only from headlamps. While passing an overgrown trail near the abandoned mine entrance, the patrol spotted a human figure, a lone silhouette in dark clothes, standing by a rocky ledge. The distance was great, about 100 meters. The patrol thought it was one of their own, maybe a geologist returning to check equipment. But when they aimed their flashlight, the figure didn't react, didn't move or answer. After a few seconds, it turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving only footprints on the wet grass. 3 minutes later, upon approach, no one was there. But on a rock near the mine entrance, a fresh mark was found, chalk or marble stone, clearly recent, the symbol Wa plus Ba with sharp lines, no sign of aging or rainwash. This wasn't an old mark, it was new. Interestingly, on the archival map found with Jacob, this rock was marked but unsigned. If he knew it, this could have been a reference point, a coordinate against which he checked everything else. The sign appeared exactly where he'd leave it if he wanted someone to understand. The night sighting was logged in the service journal, but excluded from the main report. The comment read, "Site security intact, no intruders detected." Later, one patrolman privately said, "We don't even know who it was." But the feeling, it wasn't just a person, it was a return, not obvious. Someone came back, left a mark, and left. Since then, no signals, no anomalies recorded there. The place grew quiet again. Trails, stable. Electronics, reliable. But the sign remained, and unexplained. That's the story, about a ranger who knew this forest better than anyone, and still vanished. You've watched, listened, pieced it together. So, what theory seems most plausible? Did Jacob fall victim to a crime and leave clues? Or did he step beyond the map, not just the geographic one, but the one we call reality? Write in the comments which details grabbed you most, like if the story held your attention till the end. And don't forget to subscribe. There are still dozens of cases ahead where the trail seems real, and yet it's not.